In this video, I'm going to show you how I organized my messy USB cable drawer. In my previous junk drawer organization video, I showed how I was categorizing and organizing all of the various items of my junk drawer. Towards the end of that video, I mentioned how I didn't have any USB cables stored in there, and then showed my messy USB cable drawer. My family likes to throw any kind of electronic cable, mainly USB cables, into this drawer and just leave it unorganized. It looked like a snake's nest of various USB cables, ranging from USB-C to Lightning cables, USB micro, and more. It also had a bunch of other electronic junk in there as well. Well, I finally got a hold of this mess and found a solution that I think would work for many people. So let's get started now with this USB cable organization video in which we go from chaos to order. Let's get started. Over the years, my wife and kids would just store various USB cables in this bottom drawer that's in the kitchen. I attempted various methods to try to organize this particular drawer. I tried wrapping them up so they at least wouldn't be an unwound cable that looked like a snake in there. I also tried various storage compartments similar to what I did in my junk drawer. The problem is that these USB cables tend to unwind and then just start unraveling all over the place. If you have them in any kind of storage box, eventually they're going to slither their way out of there. So what I had to do was start from scratch. So I emptied all of the contents of this particular drawer into a large bin. As you can imagine, there was a lot of junk in there that didn't need to be in there. So things like the missing attachments to our vacuum cleaner, a baby monitor that we haven't used in 7 years, and other random things, including a whole bunch of various USB cables, and also some power cables to who knows what. So what I did was throw away a lot of things that I had no idea what they were for. I also got rid of some of the older USB cables, like a USB mini cable, which is pretty archaic. So I wiped down this drawer and then got to work. So I knew that I couldn't just have these USB cables loose in this drawer. It would turn into a snake's nest of USB cables. I also found that I couldn't use storage compartments for them, like in plastic containers, because these cables seem to like to slither their way out of those type of storage containers. Well, after years of frustration, I finally came up with an idea. I kept calling this drawer a snake pit. Well, how do you capture a snake? Many times in movies and on TV shows, you'll see them grab a snake by the neck and put it into a bag. The snake will then coil itself at the bottom of the bag and doesn't really try to get out. So I use that as an inspiration for the organization of this particular USB cable drawer. So what I decided to do was get a bunch of small mesh bags to store the different types of USB cables. The cables could be stored in there loosely, they could be wound up, it doesn't really matter. With these little small mesh bags, you just have to pull on the drawstring and then those cables are going to stay inside. I picked these particular mesh bags up on Amazon. They're fairly inexpensive. I decided to go with all black bags instead of having various colored bags. That way if a random cable ended up in the drawer, I would notice it pretty quickly and could put it in its appropriate storage bag. To help with the organization, I decided to use color-coded ID tags that were labeled for the different types of USB cables. So I have one for USB-C cables, and USB Lightning cables, and USB micro cables. I also have one for aux cables. I also have a few specialized cables, like the ones that I use for charging our Arlo cameras, which work best with the OEM cable. So because the mesh bags are fairly transparent, you could see the cables that are stored in there, and then you have that color-coded ID tag to be able to identify which bag it is. I also decided to dwindle down the number of power adapters that are stored in this particular drawer. I was able to recycle a storage container that I previously had in my junk drawer, and I now use that to store the power adapters for this particular USB cable drawer. I just have a handful of USB power adapters that are stored in this particular organization container. And because my family seems to like dumping random things into this drawer, I decided to also include a dump module for a family solution. This is just a small plastic container that family members could dump random things in there if they don't know what mesh bag to put it in. Hopefully this allows a little bit of breathing room for this particular drawer, but doesn't give too much flexibility on the stuff that they could just throw into the drawer. I also decided to label the lid of this particular plastic storage container with the different types of USB adapters. So it shows the color of the bag that stores USB-C cables, Lightning cables, micro cables, and more. I've found that the USB cables don't seem to want to slither their way out of the mesh bags, just like how real snakes don't seem to want to slither their way out of the bags that they get captured in. So I now have an organized USB cable drawer that has all of the various USB cables categorized, and the serpents have been tamed. That's going to do it for this video featuring my USB cable drawer transformation. I've gone from an unruly snake pit of tangled cables to a beautifully organized collection that's neatly stored in labeled mesh bags. It's a small change that's made a big difference in our home. And maybe this video has helped inspire you to tackle your own cable clutter. While this particular video isn't necessarily an emergency preparedness video, I think that I'm going to apply the same strategy for various cables that do belong to my emergency preparedness measures for things like radios, battery banks, flashlight chargers, and more. So thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more emergency preparedness videos, and I'll see you next time. Take care.